Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Joel, I got to tell you, we're in week 3 now doing the show again after all these years, and it feels like old times. I mean, it feels
really does.
Like it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago. It feels the same way.
It feels amazing. And one thing that I'm noticing is I always look forward to these shows and the idea that, I don't know why, but the evening and, we used to do them in the mornings, like
right.
8 o'clock, and it'd be pretty early in the mornings. And so this is, I like this time and it's easier to schedule. And I don't know why. I just feel I look forward to it every Tuesday. I don't have a lot going on Tuesday evening. The only night I really have a lot going on. So just fits perfectly. So it's sort of a destination, we were doing so many shows back in the day that I loved it, but you sort of get used to them. And then life made me back away for a while. And now I value them so much. So every Tuesday is just amazing.
Oh, totally with you on that. And I think you're right. I'm actually thinking about making a shift in the schedule. I haven't announced anything yet because I'm not 100% sure exactly how I want to do it. But I've been doing 5 days a week now for about 4 or 5 years. And I'm thinking I want to scale it back a little bit. I want to make more time to do some other stuff. So kind of playing around with different ideas about when do I reschedule, what days do I do, and so forth. And I'm thinking of moving, I'm thinking of keeping the Monday schedule the way it is with Louie and Anne-Marie. And I'm thinking of perhaps shifting one of the Wednesday through Friday into an evening slot, and then cutting out the other 2 and consolidating co-hosts and so forth. So just toying with ideas, but I like the idea of evening because there's something different about the vibe. I think that's what you were referring
to. And I wish I had a tangible reason why it feels that way, but you work all day, like all day today. I've been thinking about the show. I did, and this show in particular has special meaning to me. So like today I was doing a little research, brushing up on my stats, and it just gives me a little more time to like mentally prepare for it. So the evening feels like it's a bigger event than the middle of the day.
It does, yeah. And we're looking forward to having some people join us too. I think we're going to get some people in live stream, so that'll be fun. But you actually touched on this subject last week, and we decided to turn it into the full subject for this week. And even after we finished the show last week, you and I got talking, and I have to admit, I was a little bit surprised that this is something that you have such a strong interest in. I mean, I in one sense, I'm kind of calling you a prude, but in another sense, I'm saying, wow, this is like the side of Joel I never really saw before. I mean, where did this come from?
Well, and before we begin, I want to do this a couple of times just for my legal liability here. What we're about to discuss is the use of psilocybin, the active ingredients in mushrooms. Most of the country, they're illegal currently, but there's a lot of research being done. So by no means am I advocating that anyone run out and get some mushrooms and do this himself. This is not about that. This is about the potential of what they could do in the right setting. Johns Hopkins, I've been closely working with some of the I guess I call them investigators, but the research at Johns Hopkins about all the potential. My interest has always been mental health and addiction, particularly because of what I've been through. But the results have been amazing. So I want to be really clear. There's people that are going to be, I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke pot. I don't take aspirine. So for me, yeah. So for me to be on board in some ways, the people that I've talked to about this said I'm sort of the perfect advocate for it because I was the ultimate skeptic. I just put it in the middle of everywhere. Years ago, I had a client, his name's DJ, and unfortunately, we lost him a few years ago, but he struggled greatly with mental illness, and he was the first to talk to me about this, and he was a brilliant young man. And I said, well, I can't accept this. This is drugs, and the more I started to get into neuroscience and understand the research and see the political situation, why it makes sense for the government not to want, these things to happen, it started adding up. Then when Johns Hopkins, after years of very little or underground research being done on any psychedelic substance, they started having amazing results. And then it can't be ignored. So it's been decriminalized in a few areas. Oregon is a leader and is used for therapeutic use out there. I'm lobbying the state of Virginia and the state of North Carolina for therapeutic use and mental health treatment by qualified professionals. I'm not lobbying for legal mushrooms. I'm lobbying for the use and minimally the research on that. So my disclaimer, we joke around and kid a lot. I'm a life coach. I work with addiction. I am just adamant. Young people do not need to mess with their brains with this stuff. You need to wait till your brain's mature before you even consider something like this. So there's a double warning for anybody listening that would say be under, still have a developing brain. So, any mom or dad that saw me post on Facebook worried that I'm advocating for this, I am 100% against the use of young people or recreational use for this. This is a therapeutic tool. And so I'll start with that. Normally, I don't do a disclaimer, but I'm very concerned that somebody's going to mistake this as me advocating for just the general use of mushrooms.
That's perfectly fair and actually very consistent with the Joel Elston that I know. So you actually just helped me recenter on my Joel Elston-ish.
So my interest, as I said, a friend of mine, he was a client and he passed away, due to his mental illness, and he started me on the path. He just simply asked me after talking, he said, you're open-minded. Will you just please research this? So I did. And then I started to be amazed at some of the stuff that was being done. And before it was outlawed in, 70s, late 60s or 70s. Yeah, it was widely used. And LSD was actually the main leading cause, sort of what they were using at the time more than anything else. I have not researched LSD other than just the surface level. There is no pharmaceutical grade LSD available. So I just sort of have dismissed that as a possibility, for my research. So down the road, I'm sure they'll do that, but my research has solely been on the psilocybin, because it's a natural product and, there's just a lot of safety to it. It's not addicting. You don't lose your mind. There are issues if you have certain mental illnesses that it can exacerbate mental illness. It can go the other way. And as I said earlier, with young people's brain, it can cause development issues. But the thing that caught my attention, Walt, is when I heard you know how I'm about neuroscience and neuroplasticity. So when I heard that a dose of, a therapeutic dose of magic mushroom or psilocybin can increase your neuroplasticity to that of an 8-year-old child. Yeah. For a short period of time. Yeah. Now, there's nothing more exciting to me because if I could hack my brain to always be that would be the happiest person on the planet, living life fully neuroplastic where I'm just constantly absorbing. But I can't do that all the time, but this is something that can be done. Now, the danger of that is when your brain is neuroplastic and that opening, it receives everything. And so when you hear somebody that has experienced psychedelics and claim they've had a bad trip, again, it's interpretation of what you're receiving. So the idea when you're open to everything, it would be like me hypnotizing someone and putting negative thoughts in. So you have to be very careful. So there's a term that's always used. It's called set and setting. When you're doing this, you need to be in a therapeutic, safe environment. You need to, the setting needs to be calm and serene. You don't need to do it with if you and your wife are arguing, you don't need to do it together. You don't need to, after getting fired from your job that night, you don't need to go do it. If you're stressed and lost a loved one recently, you got to be very aware that the bad trips, as they said, is just simply your brain not being ready to receive. Either everything's perspective based. If I watch a movie, you may like it, I may not. It's all perspective based. When you have these experiences, if you go in very negatively or having negative stuff, you're likely to have a bad trip, and they can be horrifying. So
they are
just understanding. You can say, yes.
It's quite terrifying. But you're right. Yes. The safe environment is critically important.
Yes.
And
so
emphasizing that.
Exactly. So the environment which you do it in. So when you some of the stats that they're talking about, one of my friends, actually is a client, is CEO in California, and this is all the CEOs are doing these retreats, psychedelic retreats. And he is, if there is such a level of, he is the most atheist person I've ever known. He is, if there is a level of atheist, he is, it's just, he is just adamant. Oh my gosh, it's just stupidity. So he had his experience, and he immediately, after it was done the next day, he texted me and he said, "I believe in God." and I'm like, first I thought it was a joke, of course. And I go, "Okay, thank you." He was actually in Norway when he texted me. So, yeah, so when he got back, we had a session and we were talking, and he said that now he doesn't define God in any way of any religion. He just said he is very clear that during his experience that there is a power far greater than him. It's with all of us, and we're all connected. And that was very clear to him. And he was very adamant about that. You'll also hear a lot of people hear that similar theme, that there's a connection. There's a connection that we don't necessarily identify, that we feel sometimes when we're experiencing these, while you're under the influence, or you're neuroplastic and you're open to everything. Both sides.
I'm going to interrupt for a second here too, because what you're touching on here is like resonating on massive levels here, including the fact that in the world of law of attraction and people who are into the idea of law of attraction, what you just described matches perfectly with the way most people describe their own beliefs regarding the nature of what's known as source energy.
Sure. And yeah, and we'll circle all the way around to that here in a second. But, the premise that you take these things, now your brains open up. 29 I'm trying to get the stat. There were 300 people that underwent an experiment. 29% of them were atheists, reporting atheists.
Hmm.
After one session, 64% said they now believe in God.
Of the 28, 64%.
Yes.
Wow.
And so now when I say God, let's don't get excited. The fundamentalists out there, they're not jumping up and down, and we're not doing that. But there's a belief. Sorry, I have to get that. But there's a belief of a greater power. And, that's massive to me, because, and I'll tie this up, and we'll wrap this into the law of attraction real nicely a little later. But so when you're open to these ideas, as we talked on our last several shows, the body responds, the brain responds. So what you believe is happening. So if you believe you're less depressed, you're less depressed. And the experience is saying I'm less depressed. So the average treatment center in the United States, despite what they tell you when you call, I've done this for years. The average treatment center at best, stretching the numbers, has about a 45% success rate with alcoholics using the 1 year clean benchmark.
Okay.
Alcoholics Anonymous has about a 6% success rate alone.
Oh.
So not exactly, stellar performance really on either, but
no.
The chronic mental illness is something that, for most part, sort of incurable. It's very hard to treat. People that need medication, to really keep their sanity, for lack of a better term, they take their medication, then they feel fine, then they don't think they need their medication. They get off their medication, and then here we go. Right. So the cycle for mental, and then one of the worst things is what people have been to war, post-traumatic stress syndrome, people that have been traumatized as children. Those are very hard things to treat because they're stored subconsciously. Mm-hmm. So when I heard, and this has been repeated, so a single dose of psilocybin in a therapeutic setting with the right thing has a 92% success rate at the 1 year benchmark for alcoholics.
Wow.
And now I've read a lot of research. So this is one study. There's several others very high, but it's consistent with what, everything's much higher. When you're comparing to the other method, it's just ridiculous. It's out of the ballpark. So, traumatic stuff. I have a young man that I worked with, and he was sexually abused as a child severely for a while, and it really affected him. And he was very traumatic. He had horrible nightmares, and he was on every medication in the world. He'd been to every therapist on the East Coast. He'd received a large settlement from a church. I'm not allowed to say which church. It's a really big church, though. And he received a settlement. Yeah. So he was, and they were paying for his stuff. So, he told me he was going to go have a ayahuasca experience. Ayahuasca is a very extreme psychedelic experience that lasts 8 hours, and it's done in Peru. There's 2 places in the United States that are churches that do it and have not been shut down yet. One's in Orlando, Florida. I don't know where the other. He went to Orlando, and of course I told him that I cannot condone that. I just, no way I could suggest he do that. But secretly I was like, let's see what happens. It could be. So he went, and he described the experience as terrifying at first. It was shocking. It destroyed him. And he had, as he describes, an entity appeared, and the entity just started calling him horrible names and saying, I won't say the word, but very derogatory names. Just, it's just parts of the female anatomy and just all these things, just really. And he was crying and shaking. And also the entity just slapped him in the head, and he felt like he fell just was falling for minutes, and he hit the ground, or he hit the bottom, or whatever that was where he was falling. And the entity came down and picked him up and hugged him. He goes, "You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't. What's all this about? That dude is sick. He's in jail. Why are you?" And it just was very loving. And he said, "I needed to shake it out of you. You're fine." And it was very clear to him. He said after that, it was just 6 hours of joy, just joy. He returned, returned back to the Richmond area. He's off all medication, and he reports all of that is gone. No more nightmares. No more anxiety, nothing. He literally feels that was a curing event. That's never been used with that kind of thing before. It's cured. And it was very real to him. Yeah. He's studying actually right now to be a therapist, and he wants to one day use psychedelics in his therapy when we make it legal. So, so it has this ability for many people to do things differently, but the neuroplasticity, the reconnecting of things, like depression disconnects the brain. Depression, parts of the connectivity of the brain sort of dissipates during depression. The brain's not active, and that's what it feeds on itself, so to speak. It's sort of a decaying brain.
Right.
This compound restores those connections. It's amazing. It reconnects and increases neuroplasticity, increases neural pathways, and it's healing the brain in a way that we never thought could be done. So that's impressive. The model of depression that I'd never have been on board with. I'm not saying for everybody. I'm sure some people benefit by this, but the serotonin deficiency is sort of a way doctors can write a lot of scripts and not do anything. So it's sold as a concept. Well, you're clearly, if your mom dies and you're a child and your mom dies, that's you're depressed is not a serotonin deficiency. Your mom died.
Right.
So, the idea that we were selling all that. So I never was really on board with that concept for those chemicals, but you can't fight the city hall, so to speak, but, for some people they do help. But now you have a compound that potentially rewires the brain.
Yeah.
It fixes the brain. Now, to be fair, done improperly, it can rewire it the wrong way. So we have to be very cautious when we're talking about all these glowing reviews with it. But when you have a chronic, untreatable mental illness or uh, treatment resistant addiction or this long term anxiety or post traumatic stress stuff, at some point, I think we should get to a place where this is an option. Maybe this isn't the first line of treatment, but at some point having that available because the results are just amazing. And when you, the two movies, How to Change Your Brain and what is it? Fabulous Fungi, I think.
Yeah.
Is that?
Fantastic
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Fantastic Fungi. Wonderful, wonderful films about experiences of people that have gone through this and explains the biochemical nature of a lot of it, how it works, sort of the history of it all, and how they became illegal and the stigma that was attached to them and sort of why. It sort of all makes sense when you look at all that. I try not to be a conspiratorialist often, but, one of the reasons that if you go see a surgeon, most likely the surgeon's going to say, I think you need surgery. If you go see a chiropractor, he's going to say, I think a few adjustments are going to be necessary, maybe a year's worth of them. Everybody, if you go to a hypnotherapist, you can say, some hypnotherapy is going to do you good. So whatever you go see, everybody has sort of a bias to what they want to do. So when you hear of something that maybe interferes with that, like a pharmaceutical company that is making billions of dollars on or Prozac or a similar type antidepressant, and then you have something that comes along and you're attaching a cure to it. It's amazing. They don't like that.
Pharmaceutical too. I mean, the stockholders are shaking in their boots.
Exactly. So when they hear that, so this is a big concern. And one of the rewriting of history is Bill W., who started Alcoholics Anonymous, and he used LSD in his recovery and was advocating for the use of LSD in his recovery. And said he went crazy and they kicked him they deleted the LSD portion and sort of took him out of that part. They never mentioned that in the big book. They don't talk about, some people claim that the 12 steps came to him in a sort of a white light experience. Some people feel that white light experience was him having an LSD trip that we got done. So whether that's true or not, there's a long-term history of people using psychedelics. It goes way back into, way back when you look at it. There's all kinds of theories of the role it may have played in evolution. In fact, I want to be careful. I don't get too way out there because we'll run off some people on some concepts, but it's a really deep dive on what potentially this could happen. So I have just spent hours of this in lobbying. I was at our state legislature a few weeks ago, and this lady, one of our representatives, was meeting with me, and I was trying, if I can get there. It's been shot down a few times, so I'm trying to get a vote. Just let's start with research. Let's just any foot in the door.
Yeah,
so I have a bunch of evidence, and I was showing her this, and she goes, "Oh my goodness, my father was an alcoholic before he passed away, and he never could find this could have been helpful to him." I go, "Exactly." And she mentioned friends, and she said, "Man, this is really impressive stuff." And so I said, "Well, can I count on if I can get it to a vote? Can I count on your vote?" And she goes, "Oh no." And she goes, "The stigma of me voting for that with my constituents I would never get reelected." I go,
"Yeah."
Oh, so passing something that can save lives and not getting reelected versus getting reelected, and so it's just you fight the.
I mean, let's be honest. That's what politics happens. That's
of course, yeah. They all do it. So I'm not. I wasn't like, oh my God, a chalk. It was like,
no big surprise here. Yeah.
Yeah. But you see the uphill battle. So getting it done when you look at the damage that alcohol does to the brain, you look at the stuff that is legally accepted and how addicting, opiates are. I can get on rants about opioids and how easily they're prescribed.
Oh, yeah.
And, how hard they are to get off of, but yeah, that's safe. That's safe. We won't do that, but, a substance that's not addicting and it can be very helpful. Oh no, we can't do that. So again, changing the tide is one of the things we're trying to do with that, but advocating for this has just opened my eyes. I've talked to hundreds of people that have done this. People swear by this whole underground. There's an entire underground of people doing this. There are a lot of therapists that are doing treatment with psychedelics underground as well.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get in. And there's one of the things that I've been asked to do, and I'll consider doing. I'm completing my training on how to be sort of a psychedelic coach when somebody is going through this and the right thing, and it's extensive training. Maybe at some point I go to a state where it's legal like Colorado and we have a workshop and then use it. I'm considering doing that. I will not violate the law.
Right.
And we'll do things within the boundaries of what the law is. But, I've had a lot of inquiries about it of people wanting to do it now. And I will not in any way condone that or participate in doing it at this point. But we're getting there. So there's a lot of interest in it. And when you start using the word cure for things that have always been considered incurable, like addiction is incurable. It's part of the narrative. By the way, I've never really agreed with that, but let's just say that's what everybody accepts. And so what if we get to some place where you can literally rewire the brain?
Yeah. Well, a few thoughts into my mind about that. One of the things you mentioned the neuroplasticity piece a number of times, and each time that you mention it, I get this thought that keeps coming back to me over and over and over again. Psilocybin, according to the data that you've been able to access and are sharing with us, gives us the ability to increase the neuroplasticity of the brain to that of an 8-year-old, which means very, very neuroplastic. I find that to be encouraging on a number of levels, not the least of which is a law of attraction level. And the reason I say that is that, while I love the fact that psilocybin can do this kind of stuff, I have come to the point in my life where I realize anything that we're able to do with a substance, that's a pointer to we can do it. We can somehow learn to do it without a substance. In other words, the quality is already there. We just haven't pulled it out yet. And I'm not saying that we have that available to us right now. It's like, we haven't figured it.
We actually do. Do.
Okay. Well, enlighten us. Tell me.
Heliotropic breath work.
Okay.
It is an intense form of breathing that it's very aggressive breathing. You have to be laying down, and you can force the brain to release a massive amount of DMT doing that. DMT, which is, I can't say the name, but DMT is a psychedelic that is very intense, and we have it in our body. And a lot of people think near-death experiences are where DMT is released, and that creates that movie of your life. I don't know if all that's true or not, but DMT is very powerful. So we could do this with this breath work, and it has the same effect on the brain as psilocybin does.
Right.
But getting there is, I've tried to do it, the breathing, and it's like, oh wow. I mean, it would take me maybe a month of work to, be able to breathe that intensely, and I'm in great shape. So you have to train the lungs and stuff to do it. But you're right. The idea of being able to induce these states without the use of any substance is always my favorite,
and it's now on the table. I think we can honestly say it's definitely on the table at this point. And that's exciting. Because that means we're really close as a species to kind of unleashing that.
Yes.
We're going through a period of time right now where there's a lot of shift that has been going on.
Yes.
Spiritual shift, energetic shift, people's understanding, all kinds of stuff is shifting. And that sounds like that's part of that shift. So I find that really, really encouraging.
Right. It is. It's amazing. And so there is, when, I grew up in crazy. I mean, as I always say, my alcoholic grandfather was a brutal human being. My biological father wasn't a bad guy, just a horrible compulsive gambler that stole all of our money all the time, and we ended up homeless. And ironically ended up living with the alcoholic grandfather who just regularly beat my grandmother. So it was not really, a great childhood from that perspective. So to be born into mental illness and addiction, I believe that's sort of the calling of my life. And, that's how I choose to be. That's why I do what I do. And I'm driven by that. And I saw what it does to a family. I know what my own addiction did to my family and did to my life. And I also know what my recovery has allowed me to do. So I think this is my reason for being here. So when I discover these type things that can take it to another level, I was one of the first people that sounds arrogant when I say that. But I've advocated, I used to treat heroin addicts with exercise, basically. green smoothies and exercise and a lot of throwing up. That's what we would do.
Interesting little protocol there.
Yeah, but I mean, and give me about 10 days and you're good. You don't have to be on Suboxone and, it was brutal, but effective. So, I believe the body can heal itself. I believe that, I'm not opposed. If I have a deadly infection, I am not going to go, my body will heal that. I'm going to go take some antibiotics. Let's be fair.
Mm-hmm.
If my appendix is about to burst, I'm not going to try to meditate that away. I'm going to go get that thing cut out. So,
I think there's a very good reason for that. I mean, not only is there a practical reason for it, but the practical reason I think we can tie to a very simple concept, which is we humans are, like I said, we're in this phase right now where we're doing a lot of steps forward, a lot of development. But in terms of the overall, I guess you could call it the expanse of how far can we go with our development, we're still kind of in the kindergarten stage.
Absolutely.
We're just beginning to learn how to do all this stuff. So there's no shame in the idea, well, I need some help because I'm still a kindergartner.
Well, yeah. The mind, the mind and the brain we are just now scratching the surface of the power of it and the connection between the mind and the brain and how it all goes together and what the body and the mind is capable of. We have a lot of evolving to do, I believe, particularly in the brain. And we're learning at a rapid pace. As fast as this is happening, it's super exciting to me. And we have a lot of people. What I love is the young people. You hear a lot of negative things about our younger generations, but they're out there pushing the bar. They're out there.
Oh, they are. Yeah.
And I'm very impressed with, we're not going to accept it the old way, guys. Sorry. I mean, and there's a lot of people that bothers, but when it comes to,
that's a good thing. I think the fact that it bothers people, that to me is very similar to say when you and I were kids, and we can think back to the people who were the elders at that point, and a lot of things they were talking about, that the elders were talking about at that point. Today we would call it insane, but then it was normal, so it was necessary for our stuff to come through, and now it's necessary for the next generation stuff to come through because that's how the whole race improves.
I remember when my mom thought that Hotel California was Satan worship song. And I was forbidden to listen to Hotel California, which of course made me go buy the album.
Of course, yeah. You should have bought out the set. I mean,
Hotel California is now elevator music. It's just background. It's the stuff that was outrageous when I was a kid is nothing now. And there's stuff I'll see going, "Ooh, that's outrageous." And 20 years from now, we're gonna be like, "Nah, that's nothing." So the pushing the bar, evolution, change is inevitable. Growth requires change. I am, and not all change is great. I'm not claiming it is. I am saying that we're going to be changing, and those that resist change are always the ones that are, miserable because the way I did it when I was 15, life was better. And I'm like, was it? Because, your perspective is sort of skewed. We have a way of looking backwards and saying, oh yeah, things were much better then. Mm. And I had one of my clients the other day. He's a young male. He's gay, and his dad was saying, back in the 60s, things were when it went crazy because in the 50s, my dad had things perfect. And he goes, if you were white, middle class, things were great, Dad. Gay or black, we weren't faring too well back then. And so again, everything's perspective based. I have some of my professional athletes I work with, grew up in the inner city. Their perspective of the United States is much different than the perspective I have because we grew up in different parts of the country and totally different environments. So all of this is changing forward. The young people are really pushing this. They want different answers. They want to, like I heard the other day, somebody said that the government's trying to, or is going to cancel Bitcoin. I go, they can't, and that's what scares them. They can't. They can't. And the young people know that.
It's not going to get them very far.
No, it's going to end up, and so I just love the idea of change, of the stuff that's moving forward. And I said, I'm not loving all change. So this is an evolution. As we learn that, we're evolving and our brain's evolving, and we discover the interruption, the psychedelic research, Timothy Leary and those guys, back in the day was really on track. If that wasn't interrupted for 20 something years, we would have some amazing discoveries, but it was literally put to stop. It was stopped because of the perceived counterculture that was coming along, the change of everything. And, you had a bunch of people that are going, we're not going to go over and fight in a war, why? Who are these people? And they started standing up, and the government said it's LSD's fault because these people are now aware of all that. And they said, we got to get rid of LSD. And so they shut down anything that they perceived that could do that. There's tons of, just documents of how Richard Nixon in particular was horrified of LSD, just convinced it was the worst thing he at one point called it the biggest threat to the country.
Yep.
That was before he was about to be impeached and kicked out, but that's a whole different thing.
Well, he had a very, kind of a limited view of what the worst thing for the country was. You have to understand his perspective was different perhaps from some other people's idea of what was the worst thing for the country.
Exactly. And I think that's true for everybody.
I do actually want to tie it, I'm kind of making fun of you, but I do want to tie in a serious concept here, a serious point, which is, as you very beautifully laid out here, from the political perspective, there was a lot of fear associated with how to think about these psychedelics.
Yes.
And fear was exacerbated by a political process and all that kind of thing. But it was a very deep down fear. And you were you were mentioning earlier in the show how a so-called bad trip is a bad trip because of what your mindset is. I just can't help but see the parallel here, because what did we go through in the 1970s and 1980s? We went through a bad trip.
Yes.
Literally, it really was. It was a bad trip. It played out like a bad trip. Well, and I'm thinking to myself, the parallels here are really quite exact to what happened.
And you hit on a theory. There's a professor that I was talking to from Oxford, and he really believes that when they started they made these films about LSD, about people jumping out of windows and killing themselves and losing control. I'm not saying somebody didn't do that, but it certainly wasn't an epidemic. It was, there's one man that accidentally took 10,000 times the dose of LSD and ended up in the hospital for a week and is fine. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's not toxic per se. If you're in the wrong mindset, and also one of the things too, when it's used as a party drug and you're drinking and you say, hey, let me do some mushrooms while I'm drinking and smoking pot and maybe snorting some cocaine, God knows what's going to happen with that.
You're setting yourself up with that.
Yeah. So a lot of that stuff was a lot of drug use, and, it wasn't just, LSD causing it or whatever. But again, there's films on their YouTube. They're hilarious about what LSD, you'll lose your mind. You'll never get it back. And, it sells. And so people that were taking LSD at the time are subconsciously programmed with that. So the trip started getting worse, and then it started being self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's just like you're saying, the government's not, they're not efficient, but they're not stupid. They know how to do it. They sell fear, and fear is how you win elections. It's how you get bills passed. It's how you literally take all of our rights away because these people flew planes in our building. So we're going to take all your rights away now and to protect you.
And we're like, how legislature justifies not going to basically find a legal method for medically using psilocybin. It's the same, it's the same thought process. It's the exact same thought.
It is. So, as we look at all this and we look at going forward, we can see why it got banned and, the sort of the politics behind that and the interruption of, and to be fair, Timothy Leary was this Harvard guy and they took it too far. In fact, the psychedelic community is sort of angry at him because it's like he got he almost got too emotionally involved with it. And, telling everybody to drop out and do this. And he got away from the therapeutic value of it. And it just sort of, it took attention away from the incredible work that was being done with addiction, trauma and stuff at the time. So you had some bad players in this, or they took it personally and they just started. I want everybody should be on LSD. We should put LSD in the water. It's like, okay, now we're not rational. We lost that rational post at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's how we got there. But with that's what one of the most renowned names in medicine is Johns Hopkins University. They're renowned.
Yep.
And I am so glad that they're the ones that took up this first drive. There's tons of universities on board now, but Johns Hopkins, something that level had to take this up because anybody else was going to be criticized, but Johns Hopkins is impeachable. They're doing it very professionally. They're doing it.
Meaning they can't be criticized is what you're saying.
I threw that random word out there. They are amazing advocates for this because of who they are and what they represent. We needed someone like them to start this, and their research is undeniable. They're doing double-blind studies. They're doing every possible way of looking at it, and it's amazing. So I think going forward, we're going to see, more and more research. I'm excited as we can get the normal process. I feel we're eventually going to have it for therapeutic use. A lot of communities are going to decriminalize it. Some are even legalize it. The difference between decriminalizing and making it legal, decriminalizing it doesn't make it legal. It just takes away criminal penalties.
Right.
And the reason I'm not a big fan of legalizing it is then you're going to have massive pharma coming in and making it. So, once it's legal, you're going to have corporations getting involved for profit, and that's what they run everything. So decriminalizing it sort of has a level of protection against that. If that makes any sense, it's sort of the thinking. People that have, tried to, pot when they made it legal in so many states, and they opened up all these shops. Well, the price of pot went really high. Well, people kept buying it from their local pot dealer. It didn't help. It just made the prices high.
It's
Makes sense.
I don't necessarily want to disagree with you on it. I'm kind of agnostic on the whole point of whether or not to criminalize or decriminalize. I think anything that criminalizes is a little bit suspect just because it criminalizes. But that's another topic.
Absolutely. And I'm saying, my position as I'm presenting this is not necessarily my personal, we feel the similar way, but I'm talking about what my group is, what we're presenting to make it as palatable as possible as we're selling this.
Yeah, I hear you.
If that makes sense. So that leads me to, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, and so that's going to sort of lead me to that next segment for me, something that I wanted to share. So do you got a comment on any of that?
That's exactly where I was going. So we're on the same track as usual.
Yes. So how much time do we have left?
We got about 18 minutes, but we're not tied down to an hour exactly, so we're fine.
Okay. So after all this research, I decided, and I've never shared this publicly. I have some friends that know this, and I decided I have to try this. And I was going to do it in a setting that it was legal. So I went to a state or a district that was not criminal. And I have a therapist that's trained in this that met me there. She's a friend. And we walked through this. And I was scared to death. I have a history of mental illness in my family. I didn't know if this was going to send me into a mental illness spiral.
And yet, before you get started, I want to touch that point for a moment here. You were scared to death. You did it anyway. Why did you do it if you were scared?
Well, by the time I did it, I wasn't scared. My initial saying I'm going to do it, I was scared. I was scared of it. But the therapist was not going to allow me to do it till I was satisfied and not scared of it. And she screened me with mental illness and she went through all the process. And she said, you're a good candidate. You have a lot of trauma. She said, I don't see mental illness in you. You've had a lot of trauma that played out sort of as a situational mental illness, but you don't have any chronic mental illness that would be affected by this. You've dealt with addiction and depression and anxiety. And I currently have really none of those, but, because of the trauma, and also I lost my son TJ, in 2014. So that's traumatic. And so, it's something that I was concerned, how will that appear while
Right.
I'm going through this experience? So so I'm up there. We got her office is a beautiful office, great view of the city. And, we started this about 5 o'clock at night in the evening, because her view is the evening is better. You get to see the lights. It has a different effect. So,
Mhm.
so we started it. I took 3.5 grams of magic mushroom, which is considered a therapeutic dose. I'm a bigger guy, so most people maybe start with 2, but she felt with a lot of my sort of meditation and stuff like that, I'd probably be fine with 3.5, and I certainly was. So, so I took it. There's a term called lemon tech, where you use a little lemon juice to dilute it, because it tastes like bad. It's not good. So you want to, plus the lemon, something about the lemon speeds it up, allegedly. It makes it happen faster. So, I took my shot of lemon juice with the 3.5 grams of ground up, mushroom in there, and we sat down and we just started talking, and there was a Bill Burr. Do you know the comedian Bill Burr?
I don't really know his stuff, but yeah.
He's hilarious. And so his show happened to be on in the background. So I just my attention sort of faded to that. And she's a believer that while you're waiting for this process, laughing is a wonderful way to make sure that
sure.
intention is there. So I love comedy. I have a weird sense of humor. If you see me on Facebook, it's very weird.
Years of talking shows with you tells me just how weird it is. So I'm totally.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's great. So I started watching that, and it was really good. But for 45 minutes or so, I didn't really feel anything. And in fact, I was beginning to wonder. I was like, well, am I immune to this, or do I need more?
That's right.
Yeah. And she goes, no, just hold it. And so the first thing I felt was my face. It was like, I started doing this one. Ooh, that feels rubbery. So so it felt with that. And then we turned off the TV, and her role is she's there. She goes into the background at that point when it starts. Okay. She's just there if I need her. She said, if you want to talk. I had an eye shade that I could listen to. There's Johns Hopkins has music that you specifically listen to during these. Also, there's plenty of playlists on Spotify, YouTube that literally called trip music, special music that's intended to play. So usually very soothing, a good beat. Classical music can be really good. It could be anything. So I was listening to it, and I started with euphoria. I was giggling, but not in a out of control way. I never lost touch with the reality at all. I was always aware. I knew what was happening. And so it felt really good. And again, since I don't drink, I don't do anything. So it's like, it felt a little like, oh, maybe I was drunk, but not really, because I was able to, everything was functional. I couldn't have driven because that wouldn't have been safe, but everything was fine. I was able to walk. And so as it got deeper, it took about 45 minutes to start, as I said. Then the first hour, it increases in intensity, and for me peaked at about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. It peaked. And when it got really peaked, I would close my eyes and I would see all kinds of visuals, beautiful visuals. I walked down on the balcony. The stars, I had never seen the stars like that. They looked like they were moving and throbbing and pulsating, and it was amazing. And I was just fascinated with that. But, and again, she was standing by the side, and she said, if you would like for me to speak, tell me to. You can say whatever you want to say. And I said, I'm good. And so I went back in. I put the sleep mask on just so I could see. That was my favorite time, because with my eyes closed, amazing things were happening. I was listening to this bizarre heavy beat music that I would never listen to in any other condition. And it was just the visuals were matching the beat, Right. Yeah. It felt amazing. And so my set in setting, my intentions, I had 5 intentions before I started.
Oh, what were the
And
intentions?
the, I wanted to make sure that I've totally grieved TJ. I wanted to make sure that was healthy. I wanted to, I have a tendency, even though I don't deal with anxiety, I tend to overthink things. My ADHD is a very overthinking brain.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping to be able to, figure out a way to slow that down a tick or two. I don't want to get rid of it all the way, but I am pretty extra sometimes, as you know. It's like,
Okay.
let's back that down a little bit. That was one of them.
Sure.
I wanted to be more, help my brain become more organized and be able to get more things done. So I had some of them were production stuff, just getting, organized, a vision of where my career should go. And, just, I was asking for those things. You never, so the first thing that came up that felt therapeutic or felt, 'cause again, this is just joyful in there. And all of a sudden, all this is taking place. And then all of a sudden, right in front of my face is TJ's face.
Wow.
TJ at 14. He passed away at 23, but I always think of him as 14. That's just, I don't know why. It's when I have most of his pictures. He wouldn't let me take pictures later. So I just think of him as 14. So he was there and for a second, and that's what she asked. I went, whoa. And she goes, you okay? And I go, no, TJ's here. And she goes, okay, well, just see what he wants. And, so, it was very emotional. And I said, hey, and he goes, hey, he goes, you're good. Thank you. You're good. Don't waste your time on me. I am fine. We're fine. Thank you. I love you. And it was over.
Wow.
It was like, wow. That was like, wow. The big one got out of the way. And
Right.
that was very emotional. And it was just very reinforcing. It felt very real. I mean, I can't claim what it was, but it was, I was expecting or hoping to talk to him. And so that expectation was met.
Did you feel like there was release associated with that?
It felt like if there was anything left to be released, it was released. I was pretty good with it before, but it felt, I'm completely good with it now. When I say that, not good with him dying, but me and him are good. Me and him, but then I started to see like this map and it just, this isn't what I was even thinking about when it was one of my intentions, but it was showing me the connectivity between humans and source energy. And so this map, it's just, it was reinforcing it's all connected. Time is all at once. You're just experiencing through that of a human. You have, it felt like, I was like, wow, I was given all this information that I seemed to understand at the time, but now I don't necessarily understand it. But it was explaining everything, that energy doesn't die. There is a source energy that when your physical body goes away, and it was getting into all that stuff, I believe. So it's reinforcing my beliefs.
Sure.
But I sort of saw the map of that. Wow. And so that was amazing.
That sounds thrilling all by itself.
Yeah. And so that probably felt like that took 30 minutes of the history of the universe in a 30-minute nutshell, felt like. And then for 30 minutes, I felt like I knew everything. So, then it led me into the law of attraction. It was like this is like Esther Hicks's face was there telling me this.
Right.
And it was this amazing moment of you are, and Wayne Dyer for some reason was there too. So they were together, but sort of like one person. I don't know how to explain that, but we were having a conversation about law of attraction and because my jokingly, I have always been an action guy, and Esther's always been a thought, you don't need action. The one part of her book, she does say action is more powerful. So I pointed that out to her. And she, like I was sort of proving a point. She goes, whatever you believe is the right thing. You're fine. Just keep. So it's like I had to sort of out Esther in that dream. the energy, it was just reinforced that everything that I have thought and is just there. It was completely reinforced as fact. It was amazing. So I love that. And
Before
then
before we move on, I want to ask you one thing. You mentioned Wayne Dyer being there. Are you
yeah,
aware of the recordings that were made between Abraham and Wayne Dyer?
yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if that may have played a role in some way.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Cause he actually did the forward of one of the books. So,
Okay.
yeah, I love him. He's a great guy. He passed away, what, 2 or 3 years ago?
Something like that.
Yeah. So he didn't say anything, but she and I had the conversation. So anyway, that was interesting. And, there's, I have some stuff that I'm just sort of relationship stuff that was really sort of clarified for me. It was really good. The funny thing is I had this old girlfriend from, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. When we broke up, it was my fault, according to her, that we broke up. So, but when we did, she had this, I forget the line, but she gave me the line like, it was like the perfect exit line. I had no comeback. And so this has been years ago. So in the middle of my travel going, I've got the perfect comeback. I need to text her. So my friend said, no, we're not texting anybody. If you think that's a good idea tomorrow, please do, but not tonight. So I thank her weekly for that because
That's doing her job. That's what she was
yeah,
there for.
yeah, cause for some reason that is such an obscure little piece of my life. Why that popped up, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I have some, I have, some like relationship stuff I just sort of unclear of, help really narrow me down on, what am I trying to do? Cause I
Right.
just have so many directions I'm going on and also just help me. What is the order of things? Like
Yeah.
let's keep working on this. Let's keep working on that. Cause I get so distracted with so many side things, so it was very therapeutic. It was very fun. There was this moment when, it's just like, as it was, I would say the peak of all this, I just sat back and it was like the biggest fireworks show you've ever seen. And every
Mm-hmm.
fireworks exploded into another firework and and I was just looking around like this and it was just, I did not realize this and, but she kept asking me, okay, cause I had tears like just running down my face and I didn't feel like I was crying. It was certainly joyful. But she said, are you okay? And I go, yeah, why? She goes, you're like, I mean, you're tons of tears are coming. I'm like, my face was like really wet. My shirt was wet. But there was no, by any means, it was just pure joy. And
That's just pure emotional release going on.
yes. And I am not really great at expressing my emotions sometimes. So I think probably a lot of emotions were able to be freed up during that time,
Yeah.
and so, and then it just like all of a sudden this seemingly familiar face, but I have no idea who this was said, we're going to start wrapping this up. And, I hope you come back. And I was like, I will at some point. And so I just sat back and said, just enjoy the music. And it just felt like I just it slowly declined.
Mm.
And it was, finally I got to a place where it was like, I'm like, this is probably a 4-hour mark, 4.5-hour mark. And so my friend's like, are you good? And I go, I'm amazing. And we were able to have a conversation. I was still lightly in it, but certainly not deep in it.
Right.
I have a hotel that was right across the street that I was going to stay at. So she made sure I was able to, and I was fine walking. I went over there to stay the night. And the next morning we met for breakfast and it was everything was super bright in the morning. It was like very intense. It was beautiful morning. Food tasted great.
Yeah.
It was like, no feeling of hangover, brain fog. It was amazing. And I say for a week or two, I felt I'm not depressed, but I just felt even more up than my normal self. It was just, really almost a joyful way of living for a couple of weeks. So it was something that I was grateful to do. It was very emotional. It was very, just shockingly pleasant. And I do think the things I were working on, better, my ADHD is probably improved, to some degree. I feel that. My overthinking is way better.
Really?
It's way better because I can get, and when I say overthink, I can get stuck on just the most random waste of time thought and spend hours on it. You know what I mean? It's like,
You know the feeling.
yeah. So I'm able to say, okay, back to reality. Let's go. And I can cut that off much faster than I used to be able to cut that off. And, so it's just been, for me, it was amazing. The reinforcement that all my work, all the journey, I thought I was going to be, I've had a lot of stuff happen. And I thought if anybody's going to have a bad trip, it's probably going to be me. I was worried about them. I was getting tore up in there, and it was just nothing but reinforcement of joy. Like I said, TJ was like the first thing, and he was really loving and just, let's don't waste our time on me. I'm great. I'm glad you're here. Just do this. And, so he, seeing him, cause I didn't know how that, of course, now when he was talking, I was crying then.
Sure.
But I was feeling that, but it was wow. But all of it was just, and that's, like over 4 hours, and some of it was just silly. It's like you're watching things bounce all around. I can't even describe it, geometrical craziness. And, but one of the things they always say is that, and I asked her if this is true. And she said, I had to use the restroom during the middle of this, and I was able. She wanted me to use a walker, and I'm not using a walker, so let's be clear, I'm not doing that. But I've held on the walls I walk, and she said a lot of people say you're not supposed to look into the mirror, and of course, there's no better way to get Joel to look into the mirror than tell him don't look in
the mirror. Right?
Yeah. So I looked in the mirror and I was good. So I don't know what that was about that people say that, but I looked very happy and said, I feel great. And used the bathroom, went back to my recliner and enjoyed the experience. But as I'm saying, this is, I'm a mature brain. I have my life together. I chose to do this. First of all, for some of my trauma with TJ to make sure all that's cleared up. But the main reason I did it, to be honest, is if I'm going to advocate for this, I need to know what this is about.
Sure.
And the people that think this is some type, in no means do I feel this is a drug in a traditional sense. I had no craving. It isn't like, if I already know I'm a heroin addict. Never did it, but I already know. I mean, I don't need to do heroin. No, I'm a heroin addict. So, that's just the way my brain works. But this is like, no, I'm good. I don't need to do this. And I'm not saying I won't ever do this again, but this was not something that I wanted to rush out and do again. This is something that I said, I may do it in a really special setting. I have a client who's exceptionally wealthy he went to Norway, rented a glass igloo and watched the lights while he was experiencing a psilocybin trip.
That's
so. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm going to have have one of those destination trips at some point and do it, but this is not a regular thing that I do.
Right.
But I needed to do it, and it was one of the most fascinating things. And I'm very spiritual. I believe in a higher power or higher energy or whatever that term is. We think similar, I believe. So all it did was reinforce that. I didn't have any awakenings there. It just simply said, you're good. You're on point. It's just everything you believe is right.
Yeah. That map you talked about, when you talked about that was intriguing. That was really intriguing.
Yeah. So the map, and I tried to draw the map, and of course, first of all, I'm terrible. Yeah. It looked silly. It looked cartoonish when I tried it, but it was very in depth, and it was explaining to me the connections and the energy vibration. Oh, it talks a lot about energy vibration and the frequencies. And it's just, they use the word frequencies, but they've said it's not really frequencies, but it's the only term you'll understand. It's an energy that is connecting with other energy. It would be light frequencies. So that was interesting. I don't, some of the stuff was when you're talking about the answers of the universe, at least I don't have enough to understand it. So there was some of it that was explained to me in a way of, frequencies is the closest thing we can call it, but it's not an identifiable frequency. It is an energy, and it will match with like energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. I'm intrigued on so many levels, and we're kind of running. We're actually 5 minutes over, but I don't care. But we are kind of getting to a point where we have to start wrapping things up a little bit. Before we do that, though, there's a couple things I want to ask about. You made reference earlier to the story of the person who went through the ayahuasca experiments. And last week you told me a story about another person, I think it was a different person, who had a heroin situation.
Yes.
Can you rehash that story? I mean, I think that's one of the most amazing stories.
This is the first time this is when I first discovered this concept. Several years ago, and my timing's off here, so I don't want to get messed up with dates. This young lady showed up, and her mom brought her to me, and one of the local doctors said, "Go see Joel. He might have an answer." She'd been to every therapist. Her parents had spent a fortune. I think the number was $2 million. It was close to $2 million. It was a lot of money.
They were
trying to get, they had plenty of money, but they couldn't, nobody had that much money to keep paying that. She was on, her tolerance to heroin was on, half the dose she was on would kill me instantly. It was just, it was a massive dose, probably a $600 to $700 a day habit.
To stash is still alive. I mean, that's the part that just is incredible.
And she was at a point that it wasn't even really getting her high.
No,
it was just her, she couldn't function without it. So, she'd been to every treatment center out west. She'd been to 90-day treatment centers and always relapsed. She did a lot of things to get her drugs that she wasn't very proud of. She was a very attractive, young lady from the upper middle class, wealthy family. Was scheduled to go to, University of Virginia and just, all this stuff. And, so I said, this is beyond my scope of being able to help you. I said, however, I'm going to give you some information that you can follow up on. I'm not advocating it because it'd be against the law for me to even advocate this, but there's a place in Peru that does an ayahuasca ceremony. And I explained what that was. And they've had great success with addiction, and it was an out there concept. I said, so here's the number of the guy. There's a guy in the United States that arranged the trips. And, she said, what do you think? And I go, I can't say do it, but I can tell you if you don't do something, she's going to die. So this isn't sustainable. And, so she did. They called, they arranged to go down there. They literally had to go down, I think, the Amazon to, like down the river, to go to this area, and they were scared to death, but it turned out to be very safe. And, so they go do the ceremony, and the ceremony is a 3-day ceremony. It starts with the night before they give her a little sample to see that she didn't have an allergic reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that, but it's a very minor experience. And so, the next morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, they have a ritual. They have they cleanse the air with tobacco, and they do things. And, so you drink this ayahuasca, which is nasty. It's a combination of 3 or 4 plants, and it releases DMT, but at a 8-hour interval. It's just like a massive, crazy dream state almost. Mm-hmm. And so she took that, and everybody, when you drink that, you throw up, you throw up. And then the experience begins. So she explained the experience to me that was just 8 hours. At first it was hell. It was all her stuff, remembering, during the process of all this, she's been raped several times. She did a lot of things that she wasn't proud of over that. To get her drugs. And, so she had to relive all that like it was a punishment. But then a similar experience, the other guy, then there, this traveler, she called it, shows up and gave her a hug and said, we're going to fix this. And she claims that she was inside of her brain with this man touching the inside of her brain, healing every area of the brain,
Wow.
relieving her of that. That's what she saw. And that went on for most of the time. And every time he would touch a part of her brain, that would bring back another memory. And he would then calm her down saying, we're fine. And so she felt her brain healing, she claims. My brain was healing during this
Yeah.
process. So this goes on for about 8 hours. They go back up the river to the hotel, and they stayed that night at the hotel. The mom had brought some Suboxone, and they had actually, I mean, to be honest with you, got some heroin in case she needed it. You know what I mean?
And tell people who don't know what the Suboxone is, what is that all about?
Suboxone is a drug that helps alleviate withdrawal symptoms from heroin. It doesn't really get you high. It has an opiate antagonist into it, but it's once you're on that, you sort of become addicted to that. So it's not always the best. It's better than heroin, but it's just a step. It's another thing to be addicted to. So the next morning she wakes up and the mom said, do you need any medicine? And she goes, no, shockingly I don't. And she goes, do you want a cigarette? And she goes, no, actually I don't want a cigarette either. Can I have some food? And she never ate breakfast. So they had some eggs and she had some melon. And her mom said she ate like 7 eggs and melon. She's like, wow. Rough experience. And so the whole time she said, well, do you need any medicine? Do you need a cigarette? No, I'm good. So they went and got back on the plane. They went back and the whole day she didn't crave anything. Which is, again, to understand the drug is just, I can't explain how amazing that is. So they got back late on a Sunday night. So they had, Monday she gets up and she had an appointment with, one of the doctors in town. She called and canceled the appointment, said, I'm good. I'm good. She claims she quit and I know she had. I mean, she doesn't do heroin anymore. She had no craving, she claims. On top of that, she quit smoking cigarettes. She just said, no, I've lost the taste for that. Her anxiety and all this, it's like she said, I have been cured of all of it. She said, the traveler, she kept calling this guy, healed my brain. I am fine. I don't want any drugs. I don't, she's, since then has gone on. She's successful. She's, married. She's got a kid. I mean, just a whole different life. And she's not on anything. She's perfectly well. It is the first time that I've ever seen anybody. First of all, she's the worst heroin addict I've ever seen as far as amount.
Wow.
And I've never seen anybody just walk away from it with nothing. Just, it's cured.
Yeah, that would be, especially given the experiences you've had, because you have worked with so many different people, so many different kinds of addiction, including gambling, because that was where your own introduction, in a sense, was involved. And I can barely even begin to imagine, but I can kind of imagine. You've just described how you encountered the one client that had the worst possible condition and they had the best possible result, and how mind blowing that is.
Yeah. To this day, she checks in. She's not my client any longer. I mean, she's fine, but every now and then she'll check in. I obviously have my own username and I keep it very nebulous. But I tell her that I still have her permission to tell the overall story, and she's fine with that. And she one day wants to, I told her what I'm doing. She said, when you get this all legalized and set up, I want to come work for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Sure. Not surprising, but still, yeah, it kind of reinforces just how powerful that whole experience was.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you can see, this is something I'm really passionate about, and it is very different from my normal stuff, but you can see where it connects now, because there's a direct connection to, that we all, as you know, I believe that there's a point and reason that we're all here. I believe all that, and my journey sort of led me to this, and this is sort of my next thing I want to go conquer.
Yeah. Yeah. As you mentioned, there are those 2 films that people can see. I know that Fantastic Fungi is on Netflix. Where do you know where the other film is? Do you know what?
It's also on Netflix. Also on Netflix. Yeah.
Right. And that one's called
How to Change Your Mind.
How to Change Your Mind. Right. So people who want to reference those, that's where to go to look at that information. Go ahead.
There's also, I mean, all this stuff is verifiable. There's tons of information, a lot of good YouTube videos. I know Joe Rogan show has a lot of, they talk about this a lot.
Mhm.
Tim Ferriss, is a podcaster that I've actually talked to a few times. He's really into this. There's a lot of these guys are into it, and these are solid guys that, are looking for different ways. And, it's just, a lot of information. I always encourage people to research the heck out of anything, and under no circumstances, please don't use this stuff without the right setting and the right people around you.
I can second that one, and I can even throw in my own personal in that. When I was in my 20s, I was one of those college kids who experimented with a lot of these things, and I wouldn't recommend any of them. But I do recall one thing, and it ties in quite beautifully to the story you've been sharing with us today. I remember somebody talking about magic mushrooms. I never tried them. I never got that particular experience. And the comment they made to me was that psilocybin was a very spiritual experience. And when you and I were talking last week, you described it as a very spiritual experience. I thought, whoa, that's really interesting. He used the exact same word that my friend from 45 years ago used to describe the exact same thing. So that's one piece. The other piece that stuck with me, I did have a couple of LSD experiences. You and I talked about that. And again, I wouldn't recommend the LSD, but the psilocybin does sound interesting for a therapeutic purpose. But the trip, so to speak, that you described, I was right there with you because I remember what it's like. I remember what the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. It's something that, I'm the most unlikely person to be an advocate for this, because of where I'm at, but after the experience and understanding it, I would, when we're able, I'm really going to, the people that need it are going to be able to get this. And one of the problems that, as anything like this that comes along in medicine, is the problem is to do it right. I need to have in the building, I need to have a medical doctor on staff at all times. I need to have a trip sitter, as they call it, somebody there to make sure. And I also need a nurse there.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has to sit with each client for at least 5 hours. So the problem that we're in, it's not a problem, but I can afford keeping it affordable. I can afford whatever. I'm not worried about that. Whatever it is for me, but I worry about people that need it most are probably the least likely to be able to pay for it. So, one of the sub things that I've done is I begin a dialogue with a couple of the insurance companies that if they ever get on board, because the cost of addiction and mental illness is outrageous for insurance. If they could figure out a way to pay one time for something and have the success rate we're looking at, they'll be on board.
Yes.
So we're really hoping that's the way that goes, because that'll make it so much easier for the average person or people that usually people are dealing with this don't have a lot of money. And, it shouldn't have to be $5,000 for an afternoon.
Right. Yeah. Well, more importantly, it shouldn't have to be $5,000 in order to get your life back.
Exactly. So working out those logistics, but we're working really hard. I got a team of people that are lobbying. I'm showing up over there whenever I can. It's a weird world, politics. I don't operate real well in it. So, I try, but like
by the way,
you're
it's
saying,
healthy. That's a very healthy attitude. that actually shows you're a sane human being.
Yeah, but it's something, and I really appreciate being able to share this. And I'm at a point in my career that, I couldn't have maybe shared this 10 years ago. Just because right now it's just people know me and it's something that I'm passionate about, and watching people live that really had very little chance of living any much longer if they didn't do this is just amazing. And I think back to all the stuff I've witnessed and all the people I've lost over the years, family members and friends and clients to addiction. And if this is something that can sort of change that tide a little bit, I'm not saying this will be my final chapter on earth, but this will be a great chapter toward the end if I get this wrapped up here.
I'll tell you something just on a more personal note. I don't know if you remember this, but you were my 12th interview when I first started this podcast. And that was 12 years ago this past December that we did that first interview. So
Wow.
I actually knew you at that point that you just referenced where you said you couldn't have done it at that point. I can actually look back now over that period and see Joel Elston's evolution during that period and realized, wow, that's where it all happened for him. That's where he kind of made this shift and was able to embrace this new thing and turn it into something that could become a tremendous therapy. I feel privileged to have been a part of just watching that. So thank you.
Well,
For that.
but I mean, and you've been a big part of, you and I used to use the term a lot in the very beginning. I don't know if you remember this. I said, I have a kindergarten education with the law of attraction back then. I don't know if you remember, and I'm like, we were learning sort of, even though we knew it, we were sort of still learning and,
Feeling it out.
I still feel I have a lot to learn, but I know a lot more now than I ever did then. So, and I also want to say one more time that the client named DJ that really got me started on this is, very special to me. And he lost his life. He took his own life, mental illness. And, when I do this together, I want to make sure I honor him because great young man, brilliant, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And, he was onto something with this, but he's just a little too late for him. But hopefully there's somebody down the road that it won't be too late for.
That's a very good note to touch on. So thank you for bringing us there. So thank you for telling your story. Thank you for sharing all this really good information. I can hardly wait to find out what we're going to be talking about next week. I mean, we've set the bar pretty high. You realize that, right?
Yeah. We'll come with something good.
I'm sure we will. So thank you all very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.